Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service, joining you on this June the 19th. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather and getting your weather information for the 49th state right here. As always, you can get your weather over the phone, 1-800-472-0391. Find us on our website, weather.gov/Alaska. One click on that page will help you dial into your local forecast information, and if you watch the right side of your screen, you'll notice there's a box framed in over the area on the map that you're getting your information for. Make sure that's over your spot, and then you can bookmark that and save that for a really quick way to get back to your weather forecast anytime you want. There's also links to the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center and your river forecast information, as well as current gauge levels there for your river in question. Aviation weather forecast, which most of you are familiar with, of course, and if there's ever a little shaker in your neighborhood, check on the National Tsunami Warning Center's information that is on the left side of the screen. If you can't find what you're looking for, you can always find me online, david.snider@noaa.gov. I'm privileged to serve you any way I possibly can. Here's a look at the weather map as we get into today. The fire danger map. You see extreme fire danger across the upper Yukon Valley and across parts of the Kobuk and Noatak valleys and the Koyukuk Valley. Some of that's running on the extreme level, as well as many areas across probably high levels for the Yukon Valley and southward into the Susitna and the western Kenai. All of that is due to high pressure sitting right on top of us, and you can see that clearing out the sky for a large area. Certainly still looking at a little bit of snow across the Brooks Range and some of the higher terrain over the Alaska Range, but what you're looking at really is anything that the camera sees is white, and that goes for fog, smoke, or just plain old cloud cover. And high pressure sitting across areas near St. Paul and St. George. You can see the clouds swirling here, and the subsidence that is pushing down on the atmosphere, downward moving air, kind of carving out almost a stadium effect on a very large and grand scale across the southern parts of the Bering and into Bristol Bay. Out to the west, another wave of low pressure. They're sending clouds northward and a lot of warm air. They're under a ridge of high pressure and a ridge that's getting squeezed across the eastern parts of the Gulf, clearing out the sky, though, for the Barren Islands, parts of inside and outside of Prince William Sound, all the way across the northern Gulf and down the outer coast. It looks like a lot of this dry and warm air is moving into southeast just in time for the weekend there. So it looks like things will be drying up there, and probably tomorrow, at least a one-day sail on some very sunny conditions there. So if you've got outside activities, things you need a dry sky for in southeast, tomorrow could be your day. Across south central, not a whole lot of cloud cover, but you can see some afternoon clouds working their way through the region. A little bit on the thin side, but certainly present in some cases, and some scattered cloud cover developing downwind of Arctic Village all the way out toward Nome this afternoon and west of Fairbanks. Another look at the loop shows clouds across the northern Arctic coast, anywhere from Point Barrow and Utqiagvik all the way out toward Kaktovik. Most of that staying out over the water in the ice, and then areas around the Chukchi certainly clear. The edge that you see right here is the ice edge, and we'll take a look at that here in just a little bit. Here's a look at your surface map, and for today, low pressure sitting across the Yukon at 1,012 millibars, feeding air into the western parts of the Yukon itself, with high pressure across the eastern Gulf, breaking up the clouds to the east and feeding in warmer air across the western Gulf into south and western Alaska. Now, there have been a few showers across the region from the eastern Alaska Range into the western Alaska Range, really hit and miss so far. Showers are forming in the late afternoon across the western Tanana Valley and parts of the middle Yukon Valley, and also across southwestern Alaska, though nothing terribly strong going as of mid-afternoon, unlike many other afternoons we've seen in the previous weeks where showers and storms were rolling by this time of the day. High pressure sitting out across the central chain is around 1,032 millibars, so things are pretty calm, cool, and collected out there across the west. And it looks like this will be a system that helps to lock in a lot of MVFR and IFR conditions for many of you flying up and down the chain and into the west coast. That should be kind of the rule of thumb for the next couple days, it looks like. While tomorrow you will develop a quick one-day sail, I think, across southeast, and many in the interior will enjoy smooth sailing. A very little chance of turbulence in any significant fashion, a very low threat of icing, and as you'll see here in the aviation charts coming up, it doesn't look like there's a big chance for IFR or MVFR across the interior for the next couple days. Low pressure across the southern Gulf is working its way northward, though, and initially it has a neat little surge of warm air out ahead of that. That's going to lower the clouds and bring some showers into the vicinity closer to Kodiak as we go into tonight and eventually into tomorrow. You can see that creeping northward by Thursday. Look at southeast, though. Wow, what a bunch of sunshine, and temperatures are going to skyrocket, probably into the 60s and 70s there. Across the interior, showers and thunderstorms may form in widely scattered fashion from the Kobuk and Noatak valleys into the middle Yukon, probably the southern Koyukuk, and into the upper Susitna valleys, into the Copper River Basin. South and west, you're looking at showers across the western Alaska Range. Clouds may bubble up a little bit more across the Kenai Peninsula, but it does look like we're in a drying trend. As we get into Friday, a better chance for shower and storm activity across the interior, especially across the upper Kuskokwim, into the Koyukuk Valley, the middle Yukon Valley, probably the upper Tanana Valley, and the Susitna Valley. Once again, you'll notice our front now is no longer a warm front. It is an occluded front. That means that warm air is still there, but the cold air has caught up to it, and that's mixed up now, working its way into the Kodiak Island region and into areas just outside of Hitchinbrook Entrance and Prince William Sound and approaching the outer coast. But ahead of that, clouds have moved back into southeast, so that may shut down a little bit of your warmth as we get into Friday compared to what you should experience again tomorrow. Again, a one-day sale, it looks like, on some pretty good heat for southeast. Out across the west, a new player in town. Out across the west Aleutians, a 997 millibar low trying to cut into our ridge of high pressure here that is keeping things nice and quiet for St. Paul, St. George, and the central and eastern chain. Even the western Alaska range, or western Alaska Peninsula, looking pretty quiet as we go into Friday. Let's take a look at those temperatures. It is going to be a scorcher going forward. We're going to start off with some mild weather across southeast. Mid to upper 40s it looks like for many around Thursday morning. For south central, close to 50 degrees for many locations, including Anchorage down toward Kodiak, Bristol Bay, mid to upper 40s for you. 45 around Nunivak Island, 55 possibly for a minimum temperature around Nome as you start Thursday morning. Now remember, we are staying in nearly 24-hour sunlight now at this point as we go toward the end of the week. Friday, of course, being the solstice, and for the next several days, many regions there, even just south of the Arctic Circle, will be towing that line of 24-hour daylight. So no reason it can't stay warm. You're going to have plenty of sunshine to do the trick. Even so, with 24-hour daylight north of the Arctic Circle, we're still talking about temperatures that are at or very close to freezing for the North Slope. 34 in Utqiagvik, 33 around Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse and Kaktovik, 35 as you move inland a little bit toward Atkasuk. Down the way for the Chukchi Coast, Point Hope, Point Lay, also looking at 30s and 40s there. Just south of the range, though, 56 around Fort Yukon, 57 around Fairbanks and Tanana, upper 40s for Northway and Eagle. So very mild weather. Cordova, Prince William Sound, all looking at temps starting at around 50 degrees in the morning. As we get into Thursday afternoon, let's go back here. Thursday afternoon, you can see temps in the upper 70s and even lower 80s from Fort Yukon to Tanana. Fairbanks looking at 83 degrees, 40s and 50s for the North Slope, so a big bounce in those temperatures as the sun comes up and you get full sunshine there. 66 around Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse, 55 around Utqiagvik, and out across the Chukchi Coast into the Kotzebue Sound region. Kotzebue itself could be 70 degrees. You go inland a little bit away from some of that colder water, and look at those temps there. As you get into Ambler and Bettles, you're pushing 80 degrees really quickly. McGrath could see temperatures that are pushing the upper 60s to mid 70s easily. Galena, Ruby, Huslia, all in the 70s. 60s across coastal areas of southwest. King Salmon and Dillingham's pushing the 70-degree mark. Much closer to the water, King Cove, False Pass, Cold Bay, you're all looking at temps in the mid-50s. 51 around St. Paul and St. George, and about the same for the central and western chain. Shemya, the air station there, could drop down to about 47 degrees for a daytime high. So it's going to be a little bit on the cool side. For southeast, I suspect some of these temperatures are a little bit on the cool side tomorrow. This is our morning outlook, and you can see readings are in the mid to upper 60s. For daytime highs. I bet you're going to see some temps in the 70s tomorrow. I bet with a lot of sunshine and a very brief period there, at least initially, of onshore winds, you're probably going to warm up very, very quickly before those winds set in. So plan on a nice toasty day in the capital city and probably for many of our inland areas. Outer coast temperatures might be a little bit cooler there, 61 possible in Sitka, but plan on some warmth. As we get into Friday morning, notice temperatures stay up across the interior again. This is the solstice day, of course. Mid to upper 50s for many from the Yukon Valley all the way down toward the outer coast. Anywhere from the upper 40s and lower 50s there. McGrath closing in on 50 degrees. Galena once again mid to upper 50s. Looks like 53 in Kotzebue, 36 in Utqiagvik, and close to 40 for Kaktovik. Southeast expect overnight lows to remain in the upper 40s and lower 50s. Prince William Sound temperatures upper 40s to mid 50s there, including Valdez, Cordova, Whittier. Cook Inlet locations probably in the lower to mid 50s. Talkeetna could be very mild at 53. And high temperatures on Friday, again solstice, in the upper 70s to even mid 80s around Fairbanks, 85, 83 for Fort Yukon. A lot of heat into the Yukon Valley and the Koyukuk Valley. Southwest, you're looking at temps in the mid to upper 60s easily. Southeast, at least the mid 60s once again. Kodiak 55, Anchorage closer to 70 degrees, and the North Slope upper 30s to low 40s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to your aviation forecast now, IFR conditions are expected across the Beaufort Sea. They'll be a little further away from the Chukchi coast, but MVFR will stretch from about Point Barrow all the way out toward Kaktovik and right along the coast itself, all the way from west to east. Out across the Bering, expected widespread IFR. You'll notice that St. Paul, St. George, all the way up to St. Matthew and the western half of Nunivak Island likely sitting under IFR conditions, and a lot of that's going to push into Bristol Bay as we get into Thursday morning as well, and lingering around the Pacific coast of the Alaska Peninsula. You may see some breaks in that IFR around Sand Point, but it will stretch east of Kodiak Island into the Gulf and then hit and miss up the northern outer coast of Southeast, but most of Southeast should experience VFR with occasional MVFR from about Port Alexander all the way up toward, let's say Yakutat and Icy Cape. Most of South Central, Cook Inlet, the interior looking to be VFR for your Thursday morning, and that should continue into the afternoon, which will give us an opportunity for some widely scattered convection stretching from all the way in the northwest coast into the Copper River Valley, and certainly around the middle Yukon Valley too. For southeast, interior locations look pretty good. You're looking at VFR there. Coastal areas of MVFR wrap all the way around into just outside of Prince William Sound, through the Barren Islands, Kodiak Island, and down the Alaska Peninsula. The Bering Sea, most of the chain, and really most of the Gulf will hang under widespread and thick IFR. Don't expect a whole lot of change as we get into Friday morning. In fact, very little change, if at all. Most areas in the Inside Passage still holding on to VFR conditions. Hyder may sneak in with a little bit of marginal conditions into the southern end of Clarence Strait. The interior, northwest, everything looks to be VFR there, except for some of our southwest capes. From the Yukon coast all the way down to the Kuskokwim Delta and into parts of Bristol Bay, you're still looking at least some possibility of marginal conditions in the morning. For your Friday, watch for widely scattered shower and thunderstorm activity to become possible again across the interior, also across the eastern Alaska Range and into the northern sections of south central Susitna Valley, Talkeetna locations, probably out toward Tonita Pass. You're probably looking at least a chance for shower and storm activity. IFR widespread still in the Gulf and for the eastern half of Kodiak Island, including Kodiak itself. Southeast looking pretty good. Watch for marginal areas to creep in just a little bit more from the coast. And for southwest, through the Bering Strait down toward St. Lawrence Island, the Yukon Delta to the southwest capes and the Alaska Peninsula, at least a chance of MVFR, and in some cases probably leaning all the way over toward IFR conditions on Friday. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass look pretty good. We're going to call VFR there for your Thursday as we get into Lake Clark, Merrill Pass, Rainy Pass, a chance of convection there, Windy Pass, all looking to be VFR as we go through Thursday afternoon. A chance for convection in Isabel Pass, VFR conditions there. Mentasta Pass, we're going to say VFR it looks like, and that should continue into Tonita Pass. Portage Pass even looking pretty good, and Chilkoot and White Pass looking even better there. VFR conditions for Thursday. Freezing levels show a lot of warm air across the Great Land, and that extends out across the west coast, 8,000 and above for most of the Bristol Bay region. And this is actually one of the cooler pockets. You can see the warmer air building in from the west. Levels there at 10,000 feet in the southern Gulf of Alaska and 8,000 feet across central and southern parts of southeast, with a little hint of cooler air just trying to drop in across some of the northwest territories and not heading for Alaska. Icing potential is slim to none right now. You'll have to get pretty high up there and above 10,000 feet to find anything that looks like it would be capable of producing any significant icing. Isolated moderate over the Gulf, way up high, and also across the Bering. But of course, convection does imply the potential of isolated and severe icing, so steer clear of that. A ridge of high pressure sits out across the eastern parts of the Pacific, and that's pushing into Alaska. You can see that bump up here. Most of what we're dealing with is low pressure across eastern Russia, across the far western sections of Alaska and the northwestern Gulf, and that is wrapping in that southerly flow that's keeping things wet and active across the west and fairly dry across most of south and east. So watch for that ridge to hang on. As we get into 9,000 feet, you can see that ridge a little more clearly here. Southerly winds over the Gulf will continue to pump in across Kodiak Island and the Kenai Peninsula. Southerlies push all the way up into the Arctic, and again across the north and west. We're looking at light northerly winds moving across southeast. At 3,000 feet, a similar pattern. Winds are a little stronger here across the Gulf, 20 to 40 knots. Light winds coming up the west coast from the south, and then another ridge of high pressure out here across the central and northern sections of the Pacific into the Bering Sea. A little bit of a stronger flow out there across eastern Russia, but really not a whole lot to write home about. As you look at the turbulence charts, 9 and 3,000 foot winds, and of course the 30,000 foot jet stream there. All of these maps available for you anytime if you head to weather.gov/AFC/TV or just click the TV icon at the bottom of the screen. So putting that all together, besides the convection that we'll be watching for firing up across the interior and the northwest into the Copper River Valley, there is no significant turbulence forecasted. So stick around for that. We'll be right back with the rest of your weather in just a few minutes.
Just as the sun is part of weather on Earth, it also affects weather in space. The sun creates solar wind by steadily releasing a flow of plasma particles in all directions around it. Sometimes the sun gives off a flash of light and X-rays. This is known as a solar flare. When massive bursts of particles explode into space, we call it a coronal mass ejection, or CME. When a CME is directed toward Earth, it hits the magnetosphere, the magnetic field around our planet that protects us. If the storm is large, we may even get to enjoy a light display in the sky called the auroras. In space, satellites may be damaged, and astronauts should take cover. On Earth, people do not feel any physical effects. We may lose electricity in some areas, polar flights may be rerouted, and satellite services may be disrupted. While these situations aren't ideal, they are rare and fixable. This is why we will continue to study the sun and its interactions with Earth and the solar system.
Longing for more space, open skies, and exotic travel? Then look up, about 30 to 600 miles straight up, at the ionosphere, Earth's interface to space. Nestled far above the clouds but below outer space, this little understood destination invites you to explore its many features. Experience both the weather from Earth and the weather from space. Marvel at the ballet of radio waves and navigation signals, like GPS, leaping through this particled paradise. Sit back, relax, and take in the aurora, some satellites, and the International Space Station as they sail by. And you'll want your camera handy for one of the region's signature features, bright and colorful air glow. This daily show is made possible by the ionosphere's own swarming charged particles, because that's what the ionosphere is. It's all charged particles. During the day, enjoy the sea of particles, freshly energized by the sun. As the sun sets, this particle party relaxes and the air glow thins. Our quieter nightlife lets you gaze into clearer skies. The ionosphere is in constant motion, an amazing effect of space weather. Don't miss when solar storms rain down. The storm separates the particles even more, making this colorful region delightfully more dense in some places and stunningly sparse in others. And don't forget about storms from Earth below. Your weather from back home also stirs up this one-of-a-kind destination. Experience the unique beauty of every season, as changes in Earth's atmosphere, daily and annually, can create pressure waves, changing the ionosphere's shape and density. Venture to the equator, where our particles are packed in lush and thick. Cruise along a magnetic field line and see how the ionosphere's charged material also interacts with Earth's own magnetic field. Don't miss the superhighway of particles zipping out to space and back down to the planet. This unpredictable parade of charged particles can help you unplug and unwind. This is because the crowd of particles can garble the radio and satellite communications from home. The ionosphere welcomes you to discover more about this little-known region. After all, once you've explored this interface to space, who knows how much farther you'll be able to go.
When a star, bigger and more massive than the Sun, runs out of fuel at the end of its life, Its core collapses while the outer layers are blown off in a supernova explosion. What's left behind depends on the star's original mass. A star roughly 10 to 20 times our Sun leaves behind a neutron star. A more massive star becomes a black hole. Unlike black holes, neutron stars are directly observable, usually as pulsars, the lighthouses of the cosmos. Discovered 50 years ago, they are the densest observable objects in the universe. Neutron stars compress up to twice the Sun's mass into a city-sized sphere. Matter is packed so tightly that a teaspoon of neutron star interior would weigh more than 1 billion tons on Earth. Still, the nature of the ultra-dense matter in the cores of neutron stars is unknown. Because neutron stars pack so much mass into such a tiny volume, they produce gravity strong enough to bend the light they emit, distorting their appearance in a way that enables the mass and size of the star to be measured. Scientists cannot reproduce the extreme conditions in and around neutron stars on Earth. They must look into the galaxy to answer decades-old questions about extreme matter and gravity. NASA's Neutron Star Interior Composition Explorer mission, or NISA, will make X-ray observations of neutron stars from its perch on the International Space Station. It will give astronomers more insight into these mysterious objects, helping determine what is under their surface. A multi-purpose mission, NISA includes a technology demonstration called Sextant. It will analyze NISA's observations to validate the use of rapidly rotating neutron stars as navigation beacons for travel in deep space throughout the solar system and beyond.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And onto your sea ice analysis now. Marginal ice continues to increase across areas north of Point Barrow and into the Beaufort Seacoast. You can see marginal ice just north of Kaktovik, but there's still a large area here of higher concentration ice all the way across the central and western Beaufort Seacoast and right along the coast itself near Kaktovik and points west. Look for very little change in the next couple days as the overall weather pattern probably won't change. There is a little bit of a cold front dropping southward that may allow some of the marginal ice to move around, but right now the Alaska Sea Ice Program is not predicting any substantial changes in the next couple days. You can find more information anytime at weather.gov/anchorage/ice. As you look at southeast, look for a gentle south wind working through the central and northern inside passages, 10 to 15 knots and 2 to 3 foot seas, northwesterlies at 15 knots across the Clarence Strait, and then across the outer coast, light winds from Yakutat all the way through Cross Sound and south of Sitka up to 20 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas there on Thursday. By Friday, a south wind on the inside will continue. It should pick up a little bit inside the Lynn Canal with a 4-foot sea on 20-knot winds. Look for a light onshore flow, 10 to 15 knots or so across the outer coast. Expecting about 4 to 5 foot seas across the outer coast of southeast for Friday. Inside of Prince William Sound, 10 knots, southerly winds, about 2 foot seas expected there. 5 foot seas a little bit on the outside. 4 to 5 foot seas coming into the Barren Islands and through Cook Inlet. 10 knots there with 2 to 3 foot seas on Thursday with winds from the south. Very little change on Friday. Look for a light south and westerly flow from Homer northward into Anchorage. South, probably talking about a north wind around the Barren Islands, more of a northeasterly wind across the eastern Barren Islands, and easterlies across the northern Gulf. Look for light winds and small seas inside of Prince William Sound for your Friday. For Shelikof Strait, northeasterlies there, 15 knots, 4 foot seas, 3 foot seas outside of Kodiak Island into the western Gulf. Inside of Bristol Bay, southerlies 10 knots and 2 foot seas. North and easterly winds across the North Pacific waters, 15 to 20, a little bit stronger there with a 3 to 4 foot sea on Thursday. By Friday, winds are picking up a little bit more, getting into a 20 to 25 knot wind from the north and the east. 25 knots inside of Shelikof Strait with 10 foot seas and 7 to 8 foot seas, even 9 foot seas really, from AKwx to Chignik as we get into your Friday. North and westerlies from Bristol Bay southward down the Bering Sea coast. Expect a 2 to 4 foot sea on Friday afternoon. Light winds, small seas, and high pressure for the chain. Looks like things will be pretty quiet out there, but there will be plenty of low stratus and maybe even some fog where you are. 2 to 3 foot seas in most areas along the Bering Sea coast. 4 to 5 foot seas across the Pacific waters and out west. Looking for a light northerly flow in most areas around 10 knots or so. As we get into Friday, maybe a little bit of a change as High pressure moves off to the east, low pressure strengthening out in the west. We'll get into a south and easterly draw from Atka to Adak all the way out toward Kiska and Shemya. Look for a westerly flow across the eastern chain, 15 to 20 knots, and that could still bring you 4 to 5 foot seas, coming up a little bit more on Friday there. For the west coast, a southerly wind coming up the YK Delta, 10 knots, 2 to 3 foot seas, a little bit more of a westerly push from St. Matthew to St. Paul, St. George, 4 to 5 foot seas. There are southerlies inside of Norton Sound, 10 knots, 2 foot seas coming into Nome. I look for that to get even better on Friday. Light winds and very small seas, 1 to 2 feet there across the Norton Sound region, 3 to 4 feet south of St. Lawrence Island, and more of a west and southwesterly flow outside of the Kuskokwim Delta and into the Pribilofs and St. Matthew. 15 knots, 4 to 5 foot seas, they're tops as you get into your Friday afternoon. For Thursday, across the North Slope, an east and southeasterly flow for the coastal waters there, 15 to 20 knots and 3 to 4 foot seas there in the ice-free waters. Southerlies across the Chukchi coast, 10 to 15. You're looking at about 2 to 3 foot seas as you get into Thursday afternoon. Very little change for Friday, and again, that impacts the ice forecast we were just talking about. A light westerly flow, 10 to 15 knots, 2 to 3 foot seas. Southerlies moving offshore from Kaktovik, onshore from Point Leda Wainwright, and southerlies north of the Bering Strait, 15 knots and 3 foot seas for your Friday. Recapping tonight's weather, spotty showers will be found across the region. We've got a little bit of activity across the YK Delta, across some of our mountains in the Alaska Range, and inland a little bit more into the interior. Watch for showers there building as low pressure develops in the heat of the day. For southeast, areas of stratus will gradually erode as we head through tonight and tomorrow. Looks like a beautiful day in southeast for tomorrow afternoon. Could see some patchy fog around Cook Inlet and areas just east of Kodiak Island as we get into tonight, and high pressure will keep things pretty quiet out across the west. Maybe a spotty area of a shower or two by Thursday afternoon. For the interior, we're going to watch for a widely scattering of shower and storm activity tomorrow, all the way from the northwest into the middle Yukon Valley and southward into the northern parts of the Susitna Valley out toward the Talkeetnas. Low pressure across the western Gulf will lift northward. That's going to bring in even more wetter and southerly winds across parts of the coastal areas in the Gulf as we get into Friday. Watch for the front to creep northward a little bit, replacing some of the sunshine in southeast with a few more clouds. Watch for some warm weather all the way around. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.